Right then, good evening everybody. My name is Paul. I'm also called Knickknack. I'm the brains behind Knickknack's Old Peculiar, the blog, the brains behind Knickknack's Daily Teaser, the quiz, and the brains behind the YouTube channel Mr. Cuddy2977, the one that you are watching now. Yes, before you say anything else, I realise this is a completely inappropriate Ron Says Bugrit t-shirt, or at least it's completely inappropriate for what I'm planning to talk about. I watch movies occasionally, and I should see something at some point, and I watch TV shows as well. And over the past few weeks, I've been watching the new series of Doctor Who, the one with Ncuti Gatwa as the 15th Doctor, and with Varada Sethu, I hope I've got that right, as Belinda Chandra. I've caught lunchtime, saw me catching the most recent episode 7, also called Wishworld, and this little video is to tell you what I thought about it. Just as a brief last word, there's a tip jar somewhere in the corner if you've really enjoyed what I'm going to tell you. Let's get a move on, shall we? Episode 7, Wishworld, opens with a long shot of a woman in a black cloak riding through the forests of Bavaria and reaching a very small hut in a glade in the woods. The family who live there are highly nervous as the mother is giving birth to her 7th son and child. A 7th son whose father, also Attila Akinci, is himself the 7th son of the 7th son. We find that the rider is none other than the Rani, Archie Panjabi, and that the Rani has plans for this particular baby. The scene shifts to an average suburban house several centuries later on the 23rd of May 2025, where we see the Doctor and Belinda, Ncuti Gatwa and Varada Sethu, have just awoken, and that Belinda calls the Doctor her husband, John Smith, and that their daughter, Poppy, needs feeding and wants a cat. There's only one thing to do whilst the Doctor heads to work for the Unified National Insurance Team. Belinda has to switch on the TV, and the Doctor has to deal with a young woman at the front door, a young woman who calls herself Ruby. Right, what did I think of Wishworld and its big reveal? As a story, I think Wishworld is a competently done, well-made, well-told episode. It sees the world swamped by the actions of Conrad and the Rani. It sees old familiar faces, Mel, Shirley, Kate, warped into unfamiliar roles, and it tells us of the menace to come in next week's episode. It also shows us a few things. The Rani's Bone Palace, for example, her syringe-like sonic screwdriver, the half-there bone beast. Those are beautifully done pieces of decoration or story elements, side elements, especially the Bone Palace. There is also the very simple fact of the Rani, at least Archie Panjabi's version. As originally presented in the 1985 story The Mark of the Rani, the character, played by Kate O'Mara, in case you didn't know, is a very amoral scientist. She's a very morally neutral scientist, one irritated at the Doctor as he and Perry interfere with her plans, and at Anthony Ainley's version of the Master for being of little help or support or use. She's a very easily irritated, very amoral scientist, I should stress. The fact that the Doctor represents good and evil in this show, in that particular story, is of little meaning to it. Archie Panjabi's version, I think, is equally as cold and equally as imperious. Kate O'Mara put a very sort of very higher than thou feel to her character. But while Panjabi's version may have some scientific dressing, there's a few lines there that tell us that. I think Miss Panjabi plays the character well, but plays her not as an immoral scientist, but as a version of the Wicked Witch of the West, rather than the scientist of old. She turns people into cursed animals, for example, and she lives in a castle of bones. Is that good or bad? Actually, it's very good. Not necessarily in a moral sense, but I think it's a very well done job. And it's quite possibly Archie Panjabi as the Rani is the highlight of the episode. That's not to say Anita Dobson as the Mrs. Flood version is bad, just that she's a very different version. Just as good, I think, and the interplay between the two is quite something to watch. The climax of this particular episode of Wishworld has the Rani telling us that destroying the Wishworld itself will do something else. It'll allow access to somewhere she calls the Underverse. If I get a chance to add a suitably pretentious special effects to the Underverse, I will. But whilst we learn a little of it, beyond what I want to do to the phrase, we are told that the Rani will be releasing someone from it. There has been tons of fan speculation on and offline, but the last minutes of the episode tell us that some of that speculation was right. It tells us who the Rani expects to release from the Underverse. No less a person than Omega himself, the Gallifreyan who, according to the Three Doctors, the first story he appears in, gave the Time Lords the power to travel in time only to be lost on the other side of a black hole. That reveal caught my attention. I am very aware by now that the modern version of the show has been criticised by some for being a little too politically correct, a little too right on, a little, for want of a better word, woke. And these people will quite probably criticise the opening of this episode, an opening that some could argue pastiches the traditional family. I don't know that it does. I think it's trying to satirise the 1950s rosy view of families rather than traditional families themselves. I'm also convinced of something else. I know that by the end of Wishworld, the Doctor is plunging to what looks like his death, telling any and all who will listen that his daughter is both real and in danger. Given we know this is Doctor Who, we know he's planning to save the life of Poppy, of his daughter. That is the important point. He's going to be saving the life of a child. That's more important than the exact shape of an unconventional family. Just as a minor point here, I'm going to invoke the late Sir Terry Pratchett's third Discworld novel, Equal Rights, the first to introduce Granny Weatherwax, if you're paying attention. The novel starts with a wizard, Drumbillet, looking for a successor, a child, a baby, somebody he can give his staff and his power to. As someone who, according to the traditions of the Discworld, had to be the Discworld equivalent of a seventh son of a seventh son. I watched the cold opening of Wishworld thinking that any minute now the Rani was going to make the same mistake as Drumbillet and find out, after the fact, that the seventh son she'd just kidnapped was a girl. We're not exactly explicitly told of this baby's sex. So, what did I make of Wishworld? Of an episode that sees a return to Rani, tells us a tale about Poppy, and tells us what is to come. I have to admit, I don't think Wishworld is my favourite episode. It's not the most impressive or stunning of pieces. But even if I'm not stunned by the piece, I'm very aware it's part one of two, and that we can only effectively properly judge it after we see next week's episode. I also think that, yes, it is an impressively well-made, competently done piece of work that reintroduces us to the Rani and warns us of what or who is to come, and threatens the death of the main character. I'm going to be watching the Reality War next week. I want to see, partly because I want to see the end of the series. I also want to see what Omega looks like. I wasn't impressed by the appearance in Arc of Infinity. I was by the costume in The Three Doctors. And I want to know if nothing else, if either of the babies in this story, Poppy or the baby that Durrani has kidnapped, is anything to do with Susan Foreman. I will be watching The Reality War on Saturday, the 31st of May, and posting my written and video reviews of it by Sunday, the 1st of June. I hope you watch the episode. I hope you enjoy it. I certainly intend to, but we will have to see next week. Come back to this channel. We'll know more by then. Please feel free to subscribe, like, share, and do whatever else you feel you have to do with this here video. Either way, hopefully, I will see you next week. Take care, be good, and be seeing you.